It is the year 1962, and we're at the Gooseberry Theater, Broadway, as Charles introduces us to the beginning of a young fan as we watch them dedicate their life to the craft in hopes to be seen on stage one day. But unfortunately, rejection becomes their reality, and their moment to shine on stage never happens. What's important to note, it's never revealed whose life of disappointment we were watching at the beginning of this episode, besides seeing like the back of their head at points, but it's safe to assume that this was the story of Loretta Durkin, played by the incredible Meryl Streep. Or, knowing this show, it could be someone else's dream that we were watching that was taken from them. We cut to Oliver taking a final audition for his play before lunch. It's Loretta who's trying out for the part of the nanny. Will this be her moment to shine? As Oliver is in awe of her performance and says to her, "Where has she been this whole time?" it appears that her dream role has come true. But how far will she go to hang on to it? During her monologue, she mentions that she would kill without hesitation to protect the kid that she's in charge of, and I think that's a key scene. Now, I know it was a part of the audition and it was part of the screenplay, but I've done this song and dance for 2 seasons now, and I've been pretty accurate about who the murderers have been, and I don't want to leave out that she wasn't on the list of auditions and she was a walk-in, and she also mentions her agent set this up, but we never met that agent in this episode. Now, it's not too early to start our suspect list. We are back, my friends. Welcome to the return of our weekly breakdowns for a show I love and I've been covering since the beginning, and that is Only Murders in the Building, and it's time to break down Season 3, Episode 1, titled The Show Must. Before we get into this episode breakdown, make sure to leave your thoughts on the episode and of course your theories and your predictions and your Easter eggs found in this episode in the comments below. Now, I'm recording this immediately after watching episode 1, so I haven't seen episode 2 quite yet, so all of my thoughts and theories in this video will be strictly based on this solo episode. But once this is fully uploaded on YouTube, my episode 2 breakdown can be found in the description of this very video. With that being said, now back to our regular scheduled program. We pick back up after the finale of Season 2, after Ben's death of the opening night of Death Rattle, as Mabel kicks into action and wonders if he was potentially poisoned, as Charles believed that it could have been natural causes or maybe a rupture thing. Come on, Charles. After Tim and Bunny, death seems to find them at the most inconvenient places, but this time around, it's not a murder in the building yet. Now, Oliver, being Oliver, starts to panic, but immediately tries to spin this and has Howard tell everyone that everything's fine and that their opening night party is still happening. As I suspected in my last breakdown video of Season 2, I figured that a lot of this Season 3 would cover that time jump from that year that we got from Ben's death as we cut to 4 months ago. Now, we learned that the trio hasn't been together much as Charles and Oliver has been working on the play, as Mabel points out that they've all been extremely busy, but you kind of get the feeling that she really doesn't fit into the trio anymore, especially if there's no murder involved. Now it's time to go to the table read as we learn the backstory of this play, Death Rattle. Now, it's a story about death in a lighthouse, and the only person in the room during the death is an infant child. I want y'all to remember that line. As we're introduced to the producer of the play, who goes by the name of Donna, and we're also introduced to her son Clifford. And if you all thought that Teddy and Theo's relationship was unhealthy, we see Donna kiss, no correction, we see Donna make out with her son, but it's okay because he's gay. I am really excited to meet these new characters because they are so interesting so far, as Charles lets everyone know that he's just like the rest of the cast, even though his immaculate television career would say otherwise, according to him, of course, as we learn that his rebooted Brazzo show is on hiatus, as the star of the play, Ben, finally arrives as we meet him and his manager, who also is his brother by the name of Dickie. As Ben has everyone sign an NDA because he is covering this documentary about his Broadway debut, which is recorded by his cameraman by the name of Robert. Now, it's pretty obvious that yes, Ben is beloved at first, but it seems once you really get to know him and when you work closely with him, he's kind of a prick. And now you can understand why him and Charles had beef at the end of Season 2. Telling y'all, I already love the new additions to the cast 10 times more than I did last season, because Paul Rudd is undoubtedly right now a scene stealer, as we learn that Ben has moved into the building. He's actually moved into Amy Schumer's place. I have to say, there's definitely something off with the relationship between Ben and his brother, as we saw Ben blamed his brother for making them be late, but also not saying the cameraman's name right, and Ben wants Loretta off the play after she did her little accent thing. So we see that Ben is is already making enemies with this cast, as it's also important to point out that Ben's got a sweet tooth for cookies, which I think is something to remember on the night of his death. As we cut back to the night of Ben's death, and Oliver immediately wants to know where Loretta was, because we saw that Loretta was someone that he championed for to stay on to this play after she had her bad table read. Things to remember moving forward during this season: Oliver's cursed at the Gooseberry returns. There's a broken elevator and only 7 people can ride on the one that's working. All important things to remember as we watch the rest of the show. Now, at this after party, which is now all of a sudden turned to this unceremonious funeral reception, we see Mabel approaches Oliver with the idea of starting up their podcast again to uncover Ben's killer, as we see Joy arrives to the party to cheer up her boyfriend, Charles. Now, I couldn't help but to notice the intimate relationship between Oliver and Loretta. The whole "you go, I go" line seems to be key, and I think it's safe to assume that he might have broke his own rule about the cast and crew hooking up during production. Will this be Charles and Jan all over again? But surprise, surprise, did someone fart and magically come back to life as Ben crashes the party? He's alive, mama's back, as he says. He was dead for over an hour or so. They had to pump his stomach, and they said it was something that he ate, maybe poison cookies. But also, can I point this out? I know he's a star. I know the hospital can't keep you against your will, but man, he got out of there so quick, and maybe he was still recovering, but he was told not to leave. But after seeing the deadlight, he had to return to see his cast. As he's talking to the cast and crew, we see Mabel's recording this as he's apologizing for his behavior to the cast and the crew for the last few months, and he wants to do and be better, but he has a special message for 2 people, one being Loretta, which he knows is a fellow snake, and he knows one when he sees one as he hisses at her. But then he goes over to Charles, who he knew might have been happy that he died, but he hugs Charles and he wants to start over again. The key thing I want to point out here, I wonder who was that person on the phone that called Ben that made him leave and take that call privately. This goes back to the death rattle thing I want to talk about, and that baby being the only one to see the death. Stick with me here. Will it be revealed that Ben has a secret child, and who could have been the one that sees what happens to him next? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments section, as the Broadway play is back on, but 2 people don't seem to be happy about that, one being Loretta and the other being Mabel, who is looking for a murder to solve. Now, I want y'all to notice how Loretta is the only other person besides Dickie leaving the party after Ben. As we end with Mabel, whose aunt's unit is finally finished with the renovations, but she's lonely, as she invites Charles and Oliver over and lets them know that she has to be out in 4 weeks because her aunt has actually sold the apartment. So the question is, what will she do next? As the broken elevator is now magically fixed, they hop on for old sake, as Charles brings up the fact that they couldn't reboot their podcast because Ben didn't die in the building, and all of a sudden, blood starts to come down from the elevator ceiling, and in comes the dead body of Ben yet again. So it's now official. Who killed Ben after coming back to life from the dead? So after this first episode, here's my suspect list so far. So I'm going to go ahead and put Dickie on that list because there seems to be some tension between the 2 brothers. I'm going to throw Robert on the list. It seems like he doesn't like the fact that he doesn't say his name right. I'm referring to Ben and Robert's relationship. Of course, we can make room for a mysterious character who we haven't met quite yet. Can't discount the cast members that Ben has had some physical relationships with and some other crew members. But right now, after episode 1, my number 1 suspect has to be Loretta. Now, I could be wrong, but again, based on Charles and Jan's relationship, we might get that again with the relationship between Oliver and Loretta. We also don't know about if that was really her at the beginning of the episode. Could she have taken that person's life and taken on their identity? And also, her and Ben were not the closer friends. There was definitely tension there. So it gives me all the reason to think Loretta's got some skeletons in those closets. So right now, she's my number 1. But I have to throw in a Hail Mary. I know it's a long shot. It might most definitely not happen at all. But hear me out. What about Mabel? Death seems to follow her ever since her very early age, with her losing her dad, can't forget about her close friends, and also her neighbor, and now Ben. She's been very animate in this particular episode about restarting the podcast again and making it so important to her. I'm just saying, season 1, she had her suspicious moments when she wouldn't lie and when she wouldn't tell the truth about things. Season 2, What about Bunny? She was there when she died. And I know it's a long stretch, but maybe murder has consumed her. She did say in this episode the mystery needed a victim, and maybe she made her own victim. I know, I'm tripping. I'm just throwing that out there. I gotta do this, right? We gotta have our crazy Hail Mary characters that we gotta put on this list, but we also need to officially meet her aunt in this season. Some way, somehow, we gotta meet her. But also, where was everyone's favorite Detective Williams in this episode? I'm very curious to see how they're gonna play in this season. But also, will we get the return of Mabel's previous love interest in Oscar and Alice? But right now, when it comes to Ben's death, I feel like his death at the play was maybe someone trying to get him sick, and it went a little bit too far and he accidentally died. Or they were trying to kill him, they failed, and now they came back to finish the job. So those are my thoughts on episode 1. I really enjoyed this episode. I love the new cast. I really hope that we do get more flashbacks because I think Paul Rudd as Ben is fantastic. I'm really loving the mystery of Meryl Streep and all the other amazing things we have so far. This was a great premiere episode. I'm about to watch episode 2, which again, you can find that in the description of this video. But before we wrap things up, let me know your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories, your predictions, your Easter eggs in the comments below. Thank you all for watching today's breakdown. I am so excited to be back covering the show that I love and love interacting with you all. So as you can see on the screen now, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out my review for episode 2. Check out my other TV reviews, and I'll catch you all on the next video.